Hi, I'm Dan.
And I'm James.
And welcome to the Cornwall Property Podcast, where every week we bring you the latest news, hot topics and guidance around the Cornwall property market.
Stay tuned to be informed, inspired and to have any of your property related questions answered by trusted local property professionals.
Welcome back, I'm Dan.
I'm James.
And this is episode 73 of the Cornwall Property Podcast. And it's a very special episode because we are welcoming two lovely guests of ours. We've got Alan and Morwenna from Vickery Holmen. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, Dan. Full house.
Very much so. So guys, this is our market update episode. You are here to help give us your thoughts and your expertise on the kind of the articles that we picked out, property picks of the week, and just to really share how much extra value you guys can add to people in their property journeys, whether it be they're investing for the first time or experienced investors. But there's so many avenues that you guys at Vickery Holmen can help on pretty much I'd like to think probably every area of property.
Yeah, thanks for that introduction, Dan, if that was the introduction. Yeah, thank you. I don't know whether to go first or whether Morwenna. I've been with Vickery Holmen for 26 years now. Morwenna's probably not even 26 years old, so Morwenna's been with us for a couple of years. But a brief bit about Vickery Holmen, if I may. Please, we're Vickery Holmen. We've got offices in Truro, Plymouth, Exeter and Bristol, so we're very much sort of the bigger southwest region. Yes, and multidisciplinary, so we've got all of the main services under our roof. There's four main business areas, sort of general practice surveying, as we call it, which is all of the valuations and landlord and tenant work and business rates and that sort of thing. Building surveyors who do all manner of different things connected with building surveying, whether it's surveying things in the simplest sense or project management or project monitoring, party wall acts, things, that kind of stuff. Property management is another big thing that we do, a bit more under the radar in a way because it kind of happens without real sort of big bells and whistles on it. And that's both commercial properties of all different sorts and also residential block management we do. And then Morwenna and I, amongst our other colleagues in the agency department, we buy, sell, let, that sort of thing for all sorts of different clients of all sorts of different properties. All the different sort of main commercial property types plus development stuff, and probably where we sort of overlap with you guys particularly is our sort of commercial things, which perhaps need a bit more residential love than others maybe.
Yeah, a lot of stuff, which is great. So I think it's quite easy to think that sometimes, agents just do like one thing, but you have many departments under one umbrella, which is really good for listeners and viewers to know that you do all of that other stuff as well. So yeah,
I guess Morwenna, when you started with us, you may have realised that we had all these different sort of strings to our bow, or maybe not.
Yeah, so I thought it was mainly just selling and letting commercial properties, and it's been great to experience the pure breadth of property that we deal with, and even land as well.
Yeah, I guess from just, again, promoting ourselves a little bit, I suppose, but the good thing for us as agents is we've got all these different people who are much more expert than we are in lots of different property areas. Sure. So we haven't got to go and find another building surveyor from another firm or an expert on something else elsewhere, somewhere within our firm. We've got that expertise,
And it makes us better to advise clients when we're on site.
Definitely. Well, you've got one big toolbox. That's the way I'd see it. Is you've got the one-stop shop. The nice thing is that James and I have personal experiences in so many of your tools within your toolbox. So we've worked with you guys on party wall acts and notices. We've bought property from you. Yeah. We've had valuations from a number of your colleagues as well. So literally every department that we're aware of, I think we've used. We weren't aware of your property management.
No, we hadn't
until we discussed it this morning either. That obviously you guys making more people aware of that, and hopefully this can help. But that was an area that we weren't aware that you guys did. So the fact that someone could come to you for kind of every stage of a purchase or an investment is great, because people like to know who they're dealing with. Yeah,
and that onward journey after they bought it as well, which is we like to be there for people for the whole journey for as long as it goes on. So we've got clients we've acted for probably over 20 years that I can think of, and so it's all about building for the future.
And relationships.
Yeah, because people need these services from somebody. So, because we can offer them all, then we like to try to cross-sell as much as we can. Really.
Absolutely. Not just saying it, but on your property journey as well. I mean, there's so many different avenues that you can go down as well in your career, which is that you've been with the company 2 years?
2 years in June, so nearly there. Yeah.
Amazing. Well done you.
But you're just about training as well to become
a chartered surveyor.
Chartered surveyor. So
amazing.
Busy a few years ahead as well, by the sounds of it.
Oh, it's definitely been busy. Hoping to sit soon.
Excellent. All the best with that one as well.
Thank you very much.
Guys, this is our market update episode. So what James and I have done is we've picked a couple of articles that are in the press at the minute that just to help keep the listeners' fingers on the pulse, keep them up to date where we're at, but it'd be great to get your input on those as well. So if I kick us off, James, what I'll go with is it's a big one. It's been quite controversial in a number of areas, but it's the Renters Reform Bill. So again, this isn't a bill. It's a bill. It's not actually out and it's not confirmed, but this is what they're discussing at the early stages now. So of this Renters Reform Bill that was published this week, there's 5, 6, there's probably about 7, 8 areas, but I've picked out 5 here that kind of caught our eye and I thought it would be quite interesting to get your opinions on as well. But obviously we're looking at it from a landlord's investment side of things, but you've also, we mentioned this before, Morwenna, but you also, and you look at it from a tenant's perspective as well, there's pros and cons to all of it. So it's really, really important to get both sides of the story and both views really, because it does affect everybody. And the first one here is then all tenancies are to become periodic, meaning landlords will have less security of income. So particularly when you're looking at like student landlords. So if a periodic tenancy is what every tenancy is going to be like, it means you're not fixing your terms. And normally you'd sign up to 6, 12-month contract residential wise. But what we're saying here is, well, from day one, it's periodic. So you're not fixing yourself. You're not tying yourself into a contract. So you're less secure as a landlord in your investment, but it gives the tenant more flexibility, which is great. But if you're a student landlord as well, well, they obviously sign up for normally 12 months. So that's a summer month straight away. Well, the tenants are not going to want to stay for that summer month, really, are they? Unless they're going to stay on for another year. But potentially, student landlords are going to have a bit of a worry on their hands there, aren't they?
And it makes it really difficult to future plans to say, in Falmouth, you find your tenants in January, and that is then from September onwards. I mean, that's not having that security anymore.
Exactly that, because they don't need to fix it so early, do they?
No. So you might have like 3 months there, you've suddenly got a vacant property.
Exactly,
then
which
really
makes
difficult.
it far less desirable. Then what's going to happen? Simply, landlords are going to think, well, there's nothing in it for me anymore. Let's sell up shop. And then we're going to get back to another crisis with the student accommodation then. So that's one, interestingly. James, I'll be interested in your thoughts on this one, Section 8. So there will be more possession grounds where tenants are at fault. So, for example, in cases of antisocial behaviour or repeat rent arrears, so in some cases it will mean just shorter eviction timescales. So it should be easier, in theory, to get possession of properties, but surely that's right.
I think it's right, and it's quite. I won't go into my topic yet. But it's very, very much related. Like I think a lot of landlords are being put off by firstly increasing their portfolio. They're actually looking to downsize because it's just so much of a headache. And Dan and I, we've been in position, but we've had tenants not being paying for the last 4 months. It's not through any wrongdoing with the agent that we used to get them. We just got a bit of bad luck, and they got into a bit of hot water, and they couldn't pay, their rent. Which for us, that helps pay the bills and all the rest of it. And it's our profitability for our business. Is we need to make money. That's what makes it go round. But to have to wait half a year to get rid of them whilst that void period is there, it's not great. So it's just quite off-putting. So I think if those timescales are reduced, then for landlords it's a much more attractive investment. Like, hang on, the risks are less. So I think it's really positive, and it needed to go that, or is going that way anyway. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on, I suppose, with commercial, it's more black and white, isn't it? As I understand it, in that, well, you've got a contract here. If you're breaching your contract, well, it's a lot easier to get possession that way with commercial.
I mean, nobody wants to take that route because it's always more of a headache to it's better to work with a tenant and fix the situation than go down the other route, because there's no real winners in that really, because you're going to end up with a property that you've got to relet, and all the other sort of associated costs that go with that, and so on, and perhaps delays and voids and that sort of thing. Whereas I know our property management department have been working a lot hard. I think it's become more of a present thing since the pandemic and during the pandemic that that was a much more challenging period in which to keep the rents coming in on commercial properties.
Definitely.
Most tenants did actually, whether it's through government grants and other assistance, and it wasn't as much carnage as it perhaps could have been and was thought it might have been at the start, but it's certainly rent collection itself just as a thing has become a more challenging thing, and it's not settled down quite as much as you would have thought it would after the pandemic's been over. But you're right, most commercial leases have very strict rules about once you're in breach, and there's a number of days, and after that the landlord could potentially go in if they need to.
Off you go.
But it's still better to try to get the situation I don't know about amicably, but at least sorted with conversation and dealing with it practically. Even if that tenant is then managed until they're until the lease ends or there's a break or something, mutually, sorting something out rather than changing the locks.
Of course. Well, interesting. One of the articles or one of the points in the Renters Reform Bill was about rents. And it's quite a big one in that there's no longer allowed to have any rent increase clauses in the contracts.
Right.
So you'll have to use a formal Section 13 notice to increase rents, which will obviously concern landlords because typically they put in there's a date or a time that a rent can be increased, but they can't do that now in the contracts. It's got to be a formal Section 13 notice. We'll increase your rent to the market rate of X. And now that tenants, not now, this is what they're proposing. Tenants can, if they feel it's not fair, go to an ombudsman and say, actually, I don't think this is fair, and they can dispute that. So again, it's becoming more of a discussion rather than you're told where you're at. Which again, there's pros and cons to that.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't want landlords taking the mickey, but sadly at the same time, with the rates that the mortgage rates are going up and the expenses, that justifiably landlords are likely to have to need to increase their rents.
And you can only have that rent review once a year, isn't it?
Yes, exactly that.
Which makes it less easier to account for your finances.
For sure. And I suppose there's pros and cons with that though.
I was also going to say that the a real pain factor there is like the HMO market, because as we all know, energy bills, especially gas, things have like trebled in some cases, and if those are creeping up the whole way, the margins are getting reduced for those HMO landlords on top of the rates they've been on for 5 years come to an end. They have to jump onto another 5-year fix at double the mortgage. Suddenly they're actually making a loss and they can't do anything about it. So that's another area where all bills are included that I think landlords really need to watch. And again, why maybe landlords aren't, exploring increasing their portfolio.
The market
at the
like they were.
They're sketchy. They're watching because it's expensive, to run these things. But
Sure, for sure. And I suppose with the periodic tenancy side of things as well, you could argue that, well, you've got less consistency. So your expenses are going to be going up. If a tenant moves out, as you've pointed out, you're going to have costs to remarket that property. But they're going to have to try and recuperate some costs here somewhere. Where are they going to do that? Rents are going to go up to justify that. And in between tenancies moving over, that's the opportunity then, I imagine, that you're going to have to increase your rents. Because it makes you that's that kind of like break period, isn't it? But again, I won't go into all the rest of it, guys. There's a lot of points in here. The article that I've got these from is on property118.com. Again, the links are in the show notes. If anyone wants to learn a little bit more about that, please do have a look. It's not all negative, but again, these are just points that are a hot topic over the last few days. But James, what's the article you've got to share with us?
Yes, we've covered a few points of it, but I just thought it was quite interesting, just with the times that we're living in at the moment, that my headline was Landlords Plan to Sell Properties at a Record Rate. This is according to polling by research consultancy, which finds that in the first quarter of 2023, 33% of private landlords in England and Wales said they plan to cut the number of properties they rent out. In a stark contrast, just 10%, this is similar to what we were talking about, of landlords now said that they plan to increase the number of their properties that they rent out. So they're not really expanding their portfolio. It's a very small majority. The planned disinvestment comes despite demand of rental property being at a record high. And we know there is so much desire for property, especially in Cornwall. There's people on the housing register and there's just not enough property. So why, this is my sort of argument, if you like, so why aren't landlords jumping at the chance to get more properties on their portfolio because they know they can rent them out? Well, I've got a few points that I'll probably say. One is that mortgage rates. I think we know that, we talked about earlier, landlords, especially this year, coming to the end of their 5-year fix and having to jump on a new product where maybe their mortgage was £500 a month and now it's £1,200 a month, especially being a HMO, they've got to pay all the bills as well. Is it worth them doing it? But again, open for discussion. Why do you think people aren't investing? That's one thing in interest rates, but
it's all the red tape as well. I think it puts a lot of people off, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Especially when you've got like that EPCs coming in as well and the new restrictions on that and then going up. And then you look at that new reform bill coming through and you're just like, well, is it actually worth all this effort and time?
And the way I look at that is as a perfect opportunity to look, if you're concerned about that, if the numbers stack, pass it over to an agent because that's their gig.
True.
That's the responsibility. That's where you guys would come in.
Yeah, and there may be even more roles for us, particularly in the sort of property management side of things, perhaps, and other professional consultancy side services, because all of this is just becoming more complicated, isn't it? Life is becoming more technical, and we're seeing that. We're seeing some landlord clients of ours who've it's backs up what you're saying, James, really, I suppose, who've been in it for a long time, some of them, but they're just getting to the, they're thinking, do we want to have to, particularly if it's maybe a property that's a bit older or it's coming back to them for some reason, do we want to do all this again? And life is more complicated looking forward down the line with things we used to do ourselves. We're not sure whether we can do that anymore. And they just sort of,
is it worth it?
Yeah, but that does mean there is opportunities probably coming forward that either for new entrants or for people who, contrary to the only the 10% who want to buy more stuff. But I think, there will be opportunities coming through if people are prepared to bite the bullet and get hold of stuff.
Sure. We're excited by it.
I was just going to say, it doesn't stop us buying it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I think you hit a good point there, Dan, with the red tape and everything, and what we were discussing earlier, because the end of the article says that the National Residential Landlords Association insists that when ministers end Section 21 repossessions, landlords need confidence that where they have good reason to end a tenancy, such as for anti-social behaviour or rent arrears, the courts will consider and process such cases swiftly. Get them gone so we can get good ones into, actually pay their rent would be helpful. At present, it takes an average of around 6 months. 6 months between a landlord seeking to possess a property via the courts to it actually happen. I mean, it's not a great cherry, is it?
No.
For a good property that comes on the market to invest in. Because what if, I don't know, you've got a HMO, 6-bed, intro, and none of them are paying rent, and you can't get rid of them, and you've got a $3,000 mortgage going out, and guess what? The bills are at $2,000 to service that. $5,000 a month for 6 months could take you.
It's a break you, wouldn't it?
So that's assuming you'd make the choice to go for possession sharpish as well, isn't it? Because you don't tend to do that, and the months tick by very quickly, and we're trying to sort something out, and then then we're looking at 6 months after that.
Yeah, and I think lenders, especially if you're not buying cash or you've got to have a mortgage on the property, that's a question they ask you. Okay, so worst case scenario, that's what they do, risk analysis. How do I get my serviced interest? So you've got no tenants paying. How are you going to service that £5,000 a month? And you can't get rid of them. How does that look like? What's the backup for you guys? And again, that's more hoops for landlords to jump through. So it's just not very attractive. It's not to say there is an opportunity out there, because there is, but it's bittersweet, isn't it? Really,
it's a real two-sided sort of discussion, isn't it? Because there's this demand on the one hand, but the problems on the other. It's just
And to be clear, this podcast is very much about helping the Cornwall housing crisis and encouraging investment. But there is a lot of talk about things just need to be just relaxed a little bit to make it easier for investors to bring properties like in Cornwall back to the market for the people. So make it easy.
I think it simply comes down just do your numbers. Just do your numbers. If you're confident with your numbers, you budget in a worst case scenario in terms of where you're at. Okay, there's this deal. What's the worst case? Can I buffer this for a month or not? Brilliant. Okay, you shouldn't be scheduling in no rents. Like that shouldn't be. It's not common. It's an anomaly. It doesn't always happen. But I think it also stresses the importance of getting an agent in there who knows what they're doing. Do not rush the tenant find, because once they're in, it's difficult to get them gone. It's difficult to get rid of the bad egg, but at the same time, if they've got a good one, look after them. Don't go increasing rents if you don't need to. Don't look after the good tenants, because you don't know how valuable they really are to you and your business, and to enable you to sleep at night. That's for sure. But again, with everything, we try and put a positive spin on it. What we're getting here, there's people selling up. They're not happy. Maybe some old landlords that have just been in the game a long time. It's not looking as pretty and as rosy as it was. There's going to be opportunities and a lot of opportunities. So I think the key is get yourself in a position where you're able to jump on opportunities, find out exactly what you want to do, what you want to jump on. Is it a small residential? Is it commercial? Speak to local agents like yourselves in terms of, look, keep us in mind. This is the sort of thing I'm thinking of. Maybe get some guidance and some advice from you guys. This is why you're here. This is the consultancy side. So I think it's just that there's going to be opportunities coming up. And I'd say just strap yourselves in and make most of it.
Absolutely.
But be sensible, and obviously always seek professional advice.
Property doesn't come without its risks, but
Definitely. Well, look, guys, thank you so much for your input on those. But we've got the part of the show where we pick out 2 properties of the week, our picks of the week, we call it. James has got a residential. I've got a commercial property that we've got in the market. Again, it's a property that we see value could be added. It could be a good opportunity for investment, but most importantly, possible option to bring more housing to the market. As we say, like this, that we need more housing in Cornwall. County help. So, interestingly, this property, guys, again, if you're watching on the YouTube, you can see this in real time. If you can't, there's a link in the show notes to the article and to the advert. Morwenna, if you can see that, all right?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
So, We have got a property here in Liskeard. Now, I'm aware Liskeard will be covered by probably your Plymouth branch. Is that right?
Yeah. We'll get them on the line in a sec.
That's it. Phone a friend.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
this one, why did this one catch my eye? One, for those that know James and I, we've got a bit of a fetish for grade 2 listed properties. But again, beautiful period property. But I think there's just scope to potentially add some value in that. It's part commercial, part residential. Again, forgive me, I don't know Liskeard very well, but what caught my eye is it looks like it's got some good outside space. They've got communal access, separate access as well, but it's mixed. So you've got the residential side and you've got a commercial side. There may be scope to convert the residential side as well to residential, but it could be a really good investment opportunity here. What are your thoughts when you're looking at this?
Well, like so often with our commercial stock, you know, a lot of things we have on the market, you step back and they seem like a lot of property for the money. Quite honestly, you know, you look at that building as a lump of bricks and mortar and say it's £250,000. That's a lot of bricks and mortar for your money. I'm not aware of the key features of this one particularly, but I think that mix of commercial and residential, you know, that's what a lot of people we deal with now are kind of looking for or interested in, because no longer can you have, well, you know, you still do have properties which are entirely let commercially or what have you, but you're having that balance of a rental income from a ground floor shop or office or whatever, balanced against
more security, isn't it?
Some upper parts that are let residentially, you know, seems to work for a lot more people these days. Whether, as you're saying, whether there's scope to convert ground floor parts into residential as well, to our mind, kind of depends on, you know, the location and the pitch in terms of retail. You know, some places, you know, you can very easily and very comfortably imagine residential on the ground floor. Others, it's a bit jarring because it's actually in the middle of, it's still a bit commercial and so on.
Sure.
A big thing for us, whether it's in Liskeard, Lou or Penzance or wherever is, and Falmouth, Truro, the rest is just the taking back of upper parts if they're not already residential. So many properties, older ones particularly, you know, they were residential upper parts, even if in the last 50 years or so they've become a shop with just storage above and so on. But more often than not, there's still the space where the staircase to the upper parts used to be, or some other sort of thing that it's not actually rocket science to actually see how you can take those upper parts back.
And it just lends itself to doing it.
Ground floor tenants are
separate
keen.
access.
Ground floor tenants are keen, perhaps even if they still do rent the upper parts of storage, because most people don't keep that much stock anymore.
No. And those shops that do have 2 floors above and you're paying that rent for them, you just don't need it, and it makes it a less desirable shop to let out.
Definitely.
Yeah, true.
Good point.
Retail tenants coming to us, you know, they might look at a property and say, well, we love the ground floor, that's fine, but we're not actually sure what we're going to do with the upper parts.
A lot less desirable and more expensive. You're paying for square meters you don't need. It just seems silly, doesn't it? But no, rightly so. That's one thing that really caught my eye was the price of this for the sheer volume of building. Again, it's already been separated. It looks like the big guts of it have been done, but again, 3-story building, recently had a roof replaced as well. External facades have been redecorated, hence why it looks so smart. Communal entrance lobby again, so it's already got the separate access split. So it is a ready to go sort of investment opportunity, but there may be scope to add some extra value, but for the value for money, I think it just looks quite a lot for your buck.
And we find you know, there is more of a wider sort of conversation, I suppose, but really from our point of view in our market, freehold, anything, almost anywhere, there's still demand for freehold. Property is still something that people want to do. You know, people want to get into property, and some people do drop off the end, but new entrants come in, and we find freeholds of all sorts of types and places and everything.
They always attract quite a lot of interest, and I think.
And even in this time when we've had the higher interest rates, everything else, there's still loads of interest in freehold property.
Yeah, it's a good place to park your money as well, isn't it?
Exactly. I was just going to take the words out my mouth, Dan, as usual. But it's pretty much a turnkey investment. It's ready to go, sort of thing. It's a pretty Georgian property, not a bad price, $250 for what you get. And what's your money with $250 doing in the bank at the moment? Put that into that, you know, and get it let out.
And I think at that price level as well, you know, we often think, you know, you probably can't buy much of a residential property to play around with at that level. So when we're into the sort of 200s or less sometimes with some smaller commercial lots, you think, well, there's nothing else for people to look at from a property investment point of view at this level, really.
Yeah.
Because even the most humble of resi buy-to-let or something is way more money.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, so the ground floor has 2 retail units, 1 let to a deli and 1 let to a charity shop.
So you've even got your risks spread there.
Yeah. Lenders will like that. It's already let.
First floor is let to a hairdresser. Second floor is a 2-bedroom flat, which is currently vacant.
So really, you've only got to fit out a flat, a single flat.
Make your money from day one.
Great little mix, really.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. James, what have you got for us?
Like it. So my residential property, it is one that is crying out to be a lovely family home. So it's a property in Porkellis, which is just north of Helston in Cornwall. It's on with Mathers at 225,000. It's a 3-bedroom, semi-detached house. Needs updating throughout, although the renovation works there doesn't seem anything too challenging. There's no chain. Unfortunately, it is a probate property, but it has been empty for about 7 months now, but only just come to the market on the 9th of May. So very recent. And it's got front and rear parking, which ticks the box for a family. It's got front and rear garden. I think it's a really good buy. EPC is quite low at an E, so some upgrading there for future proofing. I'm sure Dan, you'll have something to mention there. But I think it's a nice property that would make a great family home, and it's sat there empty.
I love a bit of Pebble Dash.
I mean, you guys on the EPC front. What I'm more of a commercial than a residential kind of expert, if you like. So what do you hit here for the EPC front?
Well, straight away I'm seeing it's an oil fired central heating. So it's a case of is there any alternative for that? Even if we're all electric, we go night storage and get some really good economy quantum storage heaters. That's what we tend to go with. They get really good scores on the EPC, and they're really efficient energy wise. So that will help massively bump that. Again, it's just simple things that you could thermally upgrade external walls, or depending on the size of the rooms, the floor plan. I like a floor plan. Again, is there scope to maybe just thermally line external walls just with a bare minimum? Even if you just built a small stud work insulated between and over the face of it, a thin layer, just something. And you could batten off those walls and just use an insulated membrane, batten a plasterboard. Just somewhere to thermally upgrade those walls, because that's where you're going to be losing a lot of your energy.
Yeah, and EPC assessors are always willing to help, and it's almost always a good idea to get them on board before you start working, because they know what things are coming in and what are changing in their scores, so they can advise you on what are the best things to get in there first. So when you do go to reassess your property, it will actually get a decent level.
Definitely.
And your money's not wasted.
Very, very good advice. And a little tip that I've got to add to that as well is if you go on, because all EPCs are stored online now. So if you literally just go into a search platform, Google, for example, EPC Register UK, you can then literally type in a postcode and you can access an EPC for any property that has one. The beauty is, what I like is if you go into that EPC, you can scroll to the bottom and find out who did the EPC, the contact details.
Who and when.
Away.
And likewise, if it's 9 years old or something, there's a very, very fair chance you've got it redone today. It will be a different rating for starters.
And the frustrating bit of all of it is you could just get three energy assessors in it, and they'd probably all be different as well. But yeah, no, like the property, mate. No, it's good.
I was only about 5 miles from where I live, actually, and I can vouch for it's a lovely little village. You're 8 miles from Falmouth as well, and good schools in the area. It's just
screaming for it.
Yeah.
Well, so blows out what I say about how 250 was a lot of bricks and mortar in Liskeard. 225, that's good.
It's reasonable for a nice little village to live in. I think it's perfect. Definitely some money to be spent for sure. Always do your numbers, but it's got a family home ready to go, and it's empty.
So, I like it. Brilliant. Well, look, guys, that brings us to a close for episode 73. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming with us. If anyone wants to get in touch with you guys, what's the best way to do that?
Speak to Morwenna. No, well, we're on all the, vickeryholmen.com as a website, and we're all over LinkedIn and just about everywhere. So I guess if you just put us into a search engine.
Yeah, or even if you just type in Vickery Holmen, you'll come up with our office number, and that'll get directed through to the right people, depending on what your inquiry is. Being a connection on LinkedIn, I know Alan puts a lot of content up on LinkedIn, just showing where you are and sorts of properties come to the market. So if you want an early glimpse of what's coming, definitely worth a little cheeky follow there for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. And just remember, you can get onto our social media platforms for the podcast on Instagram and Facebook as well. And you can also send us an email, like many of you do, with your great questions on podcast@cl-property.com, and we will do our best to get back to you.
Fantastic. Well, look, guys, you guys can join us for the Q&A podcast as well. So if you've enjoyed this one, wait until you hear next week's episode. And again, that's a goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.